Hi everyone, welcome to episode 4 of my Cash Games live play and explain series. At the moment, we've got 4 tables of 1K NL open. I've had some requests to explain my HUD, so I'll dive into that shortly. We might just have to play the pocket 10-10 first. This is an interesting spot. Button, small blind 3-bet. Tens is still going to be good enough to 4-bet from this configuration. I think as soon as this moves to sort of a cutoff open and a button 3-bet, tens you can probably just fold, but happy to 4-bet this. We use pretty small sizings here, a pretty small 4-bet sizing in this configuration. And I think we do just have to call off if jammed here. It is pretty grim in that they're supposed to find some jams, I think, with like ace 10 suited type hands, which most players probably don't find at full frequency, which is going to make calling off worse. So if you wanted to justify 4-bet folding, it's probably not the worst thing in the world either. Going to find a 3-bet with the jack 8 off, and just folding the queen 10 here. I think typically playing pretty aggressively out of the big blind is gonna be a pretty good exploit against most population pools. So Jack 8 off is a hand which can mix call and 3-bet, but I think it's generally going to perform better in the 3-bet line. Particularly in anonymous pools where you obviously can't get counter exploited for that. We see ace 8 6. So when we take such an aggressive polar 3-betting strategy from the big blinds, we don't really want to be range betting many boards in this configuration. So I don't think ace 8 6 is a board we want to range bet. We certainly have a hand which can benefit from a small bet in that we can clean up a lot of equity from his Broadway region, but it is also just going to do totally fine in the checking range. Can defend the 8s versus 3-bet here. We see Jack 9 deuce, so probably expecting some large bet sizings is what's theoretical here. We have already identified this player to be a wreck, so I'm going to assume that he's range betting here on this texture. So I definitely want to continue versus range bet. I think question of like whether I even want to continue with like a click raise, just to clean out a whole heap of dead money from him, essentially range betting would be the assumption. I'm gonna go with a small bet on the turn here with the Jack 8. Kind of hard. Like, I guess this is just functioning as cleaning out equity. Once in a while getting value from his 8-7 pocket sevens region. And I suppose also buying ourselves like the river against his like weaker ace X where we might pay off a bigger size. Just going to proceed with a call on the flop with 8s. Opening up the king jack and checking back river here with the jack 8 off. And lose to ace 9, which is fine. After picking up a gut shot here, and assuming that he is range betting flop, he's also probably going to lose his way with his like overcards region. This is an interesting size to face, the overbet. So the question is here, is this only his kings, queens, aces, ace, jack region? I think I'm happy to call off against this player. I think he's going to be too aggressive. I have too many draws. I just don't think. I mean, that's a pretty interesting spot there. Um, Let me think about this king jack hand before I loop back to the pocket eights. I'm honestly pretty tempted to just flop fold here. We've got a player who is been fairly tight, and it has been fairly tight, and is raising flop versus my under the gun over bet. I think we just fold immediately versus this. Like I imagine this is just underbluffed. I imagine we can. I'm not sure if we're allowed to fold there in theory, or if we have to pure continue. But once we account for the fact that villains are going to have a really hard time finding bluff raises against pot there, um, I imagine the fold is just going to do fine. And we have a hand with like no real improvability, so it's going to be pretty tough to play turns and rivers there. Can defend the 5-3 suited. That with check. I didn't get very far through explaining my hard flash. I don't think I started, but I will get to that in a moment. We have just had a busy start. Going to defend on ace ace 3. That's a nice turn to bring us additional equity when behind. The snap check back. I think we just check river. Like I don't see what we're ever getting called by. And I don't know whether we can call river. This is actually a pretty nice candidate. I don't have time to raise it. It's a nice candidate to raise. I think we can do that at a non-zero frequency if we want to. It might be getting slightly out of line, and maybe we don't want to play against an aggressive opponent who might also just play back at us. But I think it's a viable candidate, particularly in pools where players aren't going to play particularly well against it. I think we just fold here. Like, is he? So the pot sizing from recreational players is generally going to be quite strong. But does he bet pot when we can have so much 4x? He doesn't really have 4x in range. And I guess he has a whole bunch of Broadway bluffs, and he's deciding that now we don't have ace x very often. I'm going to call in the end. I've talked myself into this. He does have the ace x. I guess that's a question of whether my assumption was that he might not take that sizing with ace x, right? So it kind of hinges on that assumption. So it's like, how aggressively do they bet ace x there? And I ultimately decided that I didn't think that he'd take that sizing line with that much ace x, which would then weight his range to being more bluffs. But there were definitely some things counting against calling, like the sizing of being pot is typically going to be an underbluff sizing. Yeah, the snap check on turn also is like a bit of a timing tell, which it wasn't clear to me which way to interpret that. So we bet quarter pot here on flop. I think we can go a variety of ways here. We probably just keep betting here. We'll go 3/4 pot on turn and get it through. Let me get the HUD down whilst I have no hands. Top left, we have the VPIP. The next number on the right is the PFR. In anonymous pools, we can't actually work with that much data because you don't track people over time. The software is Drive HUD 2. So yeah, I only use a select handful of stats, the first two being VPIP and PFR. The third one being the three bet percentage, which is this 13.6 number that I'm hovering over. That's the three bet percentage. Again, when we're dealing with really small sample sizes, you have to be pretty careful with the three bet percentage because ultimately, if someone just gets dealt good hands and they three bet, three hands in a row, then their three bet percentage for a long time is going to be like really elevated, but actually they were just getting good hands. I might actually just let the sixes go here. It's a totally fine hand to defend, but I'm just looking at this guy who's got, a tighter VPIP over eight hands. It's a tiny sample, but it's leaning towards tight. And this is a marginal holding to defend versus three bet anyway. So I think when we're leaning that he may well be just like a tighter player, um, letting go of the sixes there is going to be fine. It's also totally fine to call as well. Like I think it's pretty much a zero EV spot. Um, what I get to? So that's the three bet percentage, and then the next number across is the aggression percentage. So how often they take aggressive actions on flop, turn, and river. And then bottom left number is the fold to c bet percentage. And I also look at there's how often they raise c bet as well there. Gonna four bet the ace jack off here. And then the bottom right number is the just total hands played. I think, yeah, this middle number on the bottom row I don't really use. I think it's the cold call percentage. So, yeah, not a common stat that you're going to see amongst regulars. Yeah, so obviously, like working with a hard and an anonymous pool, you're not going to get as much out of it as if you were able to track people over the long term. But it's all points of data which can allow you to make assumptions based off small reads. You'll be able to identify fish within a couple of hands based on the specific lines they take, and just being able to derive those reads as early as possible is going to do wonders for your win rate. Gonna fold threes. I'm pretty tempted to get in the mix with this guy, but not versus three big blind open, and particularly like he's only playing off 30 big blinds at the moment. I don't know if I ever got round to talking about the pocket eights hand um, in full detail. I think ultimately we faced an effective jam on the turn, which my assumption was that was going to be a draw heavy range, as opposed to a range filled with sort of like ace jack plus, or yeah, here was the spot here facing an effective jam. Yeah, whether we're going to face this from ace jack or aces, kings, queens. I just don't expect to. I expect ace jack, queens, kings, and aces to be there at a non-zero frequency that take this line. It's just a fish who, um, wants to fast play his one player hand. Doesn't want the board to get any scarier. Like I can see that logic flowing through that would be how he plays the hand, which obviously is not a point in favor of calling with the eights there. I think the thing that swayed it for me into calling is that he presumably ranged bet flop, um, which means that he's left his range still like really wide. So even if he has these like queens, kings, and aces, his range is still really wide. So he has plenty of other hands to choose from that might also take that line, and that's going to include your straight draws, flush draws, but then also like maybe some, well, king queen's a gut shot, and also like there's a non-zero like spew factor as well, where we know he's a recreational player and he might just be losing his mind with some random combination. And particularly when we allow fish to keep their range nice and wide on the flop, that's when they're going to compound their errors onto the turn and the river. Um, that being said, like I don't think that was certainly not a slam dunk call, and I'm super happy with it. I think even with those assumptions that I've laid out, I think the spot is really close, and perhaps even fold is the um might still be the best play. I guess like one of the other considerations is I think we had a gut shot as well, right? So even when behind, we're not dead to 5%. We're dead to sort of a 15% or something in that range, which swings it slightly more in favor again for us. We'll sit out of this table. Short stacked doesn't look like we have any recreational players here. I'm going to start with a 25% pot. I think we can range bet and just expect players not to play back aggressively against this. Like it's not going to be theoretical that we can range bet it, but um, it's certainly not the end of the world and is going to be fine to do if players aren't aggressive enough against it. Um, we we're just trying to find a fourth table. That was a 2K table that I opened. There's often like players open sitting with 50 big blinds. I assume they're just regulars. I don't actually know, but I assume they're just regulars. If they were fish, they would already have a full table sitting around them. Is basically the principle that I take there. So I think it's often just a regular who then just buys in for the 400 big blinds once you sit down with them. The ace-7 off here, we can go both ways between bet and check. I think we do have enough showdown equity to just check this back. And just going to fold the ace-4 off versus the 4 big blind ISO. King Jack 9, King. I think we can call one here with some extra equity from the clubs, and also ace high can just be good here. Again, it's a wide range spot, small blind versus big blind. This player's been relatively aggressive, so it's maybe a spot where he arrives on turn, arrives on river, where he's got too much of range. And once we're here, I think I am just going to end up flicking in a call. It's not, yeah, I'm not super happy about this. I'm not super happy about the sizing that he has used of 75% pot. But I think we will land on call. But I don't expect this to be massively plus EV. Yep, just had the nuts essentially. Yeah, I think that was a pretty marginal spot there. Again, if we want to justify folding, I can get behind justify folding there. But I think against a player who's relatively aggressive is going to be the assumption, and they have a small blind range. There aren't that many combos of hands better than us. I think we can justify a call. Open up the tens. And the new table we've got here looks like we've got a nice seat on a recreational player, essentially another recreational player here as well. A tiny 4-bet sizing, which I think is probably actually totally fine given his stack size. Um, like you probably want to go even smaller than you normally would. Ace 10 suited here, we can flat, we can 3-bet. Both are going to be fine. Flat this time. Double check. And going to start with call. This hand's probably just a bit too strong to check raise. Like I think we do want to check raise high frequency against this bet from a recreational player who's like probably just betting way too randomly on 776 where we have like a 7x advantage. But as I said, I think this hand is just a bit too strong. See a 4 big blind open from the recreational, just something to note. Yeah, and now I'm just not planning on folding versus this player. We saw him flatting like 10-7 off from the small blind, so like I just think his range is going to be way too wide. Like yes, he can have good hands, but when his range is way too wide, then he is going to make way too many mistakes. And he does just snap check the river. I think we're going to bet into this player here. It's a it's not an amazing hand. I don't really want to check call or check fold this hand like ace high here. And I think we're just going to get stabbed into it super high frequency on flop. So obviously against this player, like when I actually have a pair, I'm going to be more likely to check to him because I'm expecting like a flop stab at like quite a high frequency. Whereas when I have nothing, I'm going to be more likely to stab into him. As it is, we face just raise anyway, which we'll let go of our hand. I think 7 off is pretty marginal, but we've got a tight player in the big blind and we have this recreational in the small blind. I think it's going to be fine to open. And opening the queen 3 suited. We see king deuce deuce. I think we can start with a range bet small here. Like the paired low card is not typically a board that you're going to range bet, but the once we sort of get below a 4, like the 2x and the 3x, when those cards are paired, it's not really big blind doesn't defend as many of those combos, so it's they have less trips in range, which then just allows us to increase our betting frequency again. Open up the king jack. Yeah, so this guy like had literally snap call on. I think he's probably like just again going off tiny sample sizes. Seems like the kind of player who's also just going to snap call an ISO. So I'm going to ISO quite big here. I'm going to go to like 7.5 big blinds. This is bigger. I normally ISO quite big, and this is bigger than even like normally I just ISO this to like 5 big blinds. But just off the timing there, like I'm expecting to get called at a higher frequency. As it is, we see him like snap folds to that sizing. So like next time around, we'll probably size down a little bit more. And maybe actually I want to it's like, do I want to take my more marginal hands that are ISO raising there and raise those to 7.5, and then like ace king to 5 big blinds. Certainly, if we had like, aces or something, I think we'll take a smaller ISO sizing there when we have like a super invincible hand. Raise the 10-8 off and fold the queen 5. Face a pretty snap jam, 4-bet jam. That's totally fine. Gonna raise the ace 8 off, like it's pretty loose, but we've got a fish in the big blind that we want to play against. As it is, this is a tiny 3-bet, but I think then playing 3-ways, we'll just let this one go. Gonna range bet the 7-9 off here. And I think we're probably up against a recreational here who's like over floating flop is my like typical assumption, and so they're going to fold high frequency versus B75 on the turn. Is going to be my like standard assumption. And then once they call turn, like I don't have much interest in barreling him off river here. Like I just don't think we ever get his air region to fold. And I think we've folded out most of his, ace high queen high region. Sorry, ace high king high region by turn. Yeah, so we're just like never getting queen four to fold. Not that we're supposed to. So this was the guy that's 3-bet us. Sorry, raise flop after we overbet flop. This is not going to be a texture that we really want to overbet on. I am going to start with a large sizing though. We'll take the smaller ISO sizing against the fish up here. And we do get a snap call versus that size. Queen 6 is pretty marginal. Heads up here, we're just going to let this one go. And we do get the raise. I think once we see this line again, like I'm just now not planning on folding ace queen versus this guy. Like he's probably over aggressive. We also see a donk here, which at least makes our life simple when we have a hand as trashy as king 4. Just taking a note on how he's playing that hand. Call. Really nice turn in that now we have additional equity to just like always call turn here. We've seen this guy top up to a full stack. I might sit out. I'm like unsure. He's been reasonably aggressive. And I don't typically play heads up. We can flat the small blind here. We can also squeeze as well. Just going to call. And it's nice when you get there. Obviously lose to 7-8 of hearts and a few other combos. But we're pretty happy with that. It does check though, just a bit of a shame. I think we can pretty much open any two from the button here. Like you're not quite going to be able to do that in theory, although you can get very close. But also then once you factor in that villains are going to under 3-bet relative to what they need to, it becomes like pretty fine to just do that. Obviously shoving the ace queen here and going to let go of the jack deuce. So we see a lead call. Do we raise now? I think we do. It's like pretty megaphone like raising now. But also like I'm out of position and don't expect to be able to build a pot. Don't expect to be able to build a pot at a high frequency if we just call and then like, turn's going to check through at a really high frequency. Now obviously we have the super nuts. I think we just bet that jam. We do get a call here, which is pretty nice. I'll let you know what he had. And we'll open up another table. Unfortunately, get the folds top left. Okay, so we yeah, had the set of fours, so middle set on flop. So again, like that initial read of like I suppose the first time, like it's really hard to find raises versus the larger sizing flop C bets, and so the second time that he was doing it, also wasn't bluffing, and he just couldn't end up finding a fold on a sort of unfavorable run out for his hand. So anyway, we got reasonably lucky there with that run out. Not that we're ever folding flop or turn, like in theory, there anyway. Like the way we played the hand is totally fine. With the backdoor hearts and then obviously turning the flush draw. Yeah, just never going to play that hand any other way. I guess the question is whether we should fold river if we face jammed when we had if we had face jam when we hadn't got there. And I think like the way I had kind of made up my mind was that I wasn't going to fold, and perhaps theory is finding folds there. That's probably like we were potentially putting ourselves in a position to misplay river, if we hadn't gotten there. I know we said we can pretty much open range. 8-3 off is like very, very much at the bottom. Gonna let it go and find a proper table. Like if villains are like not 3-betting at the right frequency, it is probably fine to open 8-3 off. Well, we are playing 1K and like, you know, there are some good regs in the pool. And certainly like plenty of players that are going to be better than me as well. So when I'm not specialized in heads up play, it's probably worth not taking that edge, not taking that spot. We've opened up a table of 2K here. No short stacks. The table is running though. I'll just give this an orbit and see what happens. If we see anything spicy going on, just going to fold the 4-9. Going to wrap up pretty soon as well. Been a good session. A couple of close spots. A couple of spots which like were very marginal where I was calling down. Yeah, I will say like I'm certainly leaning on the side of a calling station in these pools. So you know if you're looking at some of these spots and saying like that's a clear snap fold, yeah, with the right assumptions can get behind folding a couple of those spots as well. But ended up winning a couple of stacks, which is nice. Yeah, just want to thank you all for engaging with the content. Yeah, if you do enjoy this, please give the video a like, leave a comment if you have any questions about any of the hands, or if you want to say that one of the hero calls was terrible, by all means go for it. And yeah, like and subscribe. Awesome. Catch you next time. Cheers.